Brian. You have Brian Saber has led more than 1,000 presentations. I don't think he has any gray hair, including in-person webinars and board training sessions. He is now working on book number 4, of which I'm very jealous. And he's actually going to discuss it during this webinar. And I told him I'm going to ask him one really tough question. Brian, could you share what elementary school you went to?
Yes, actually, it literally was called Number 3 School. It wasn't named for anyone. It didn't have anything formal. For some ridiculous reason, some of my friends went to Number 6. Some went to Number 5. I went to Number 3 School, public school number 3. It was that generic. It was in Cedarhurst, New York, out on Long Island, which I will try to say as 2 words. And I lived in the next town over. That's where I went to school.
Okay, and that's a name you won't forget. It's a short name, too. Hey, by the way, I always like to start with this question with a fundraising authority. Why do you think so many professional and volunteer, and particularly volunteer nonprofit leaders who are virtually fearless in everything else they have to face in life, are so terrified of asking someone they know face-to-face for a gift?
Well, let me start by saying that lots of people actually have fear asking for lots of things. It's not just money and charitable gifts. And I'm delighted Andrea is with us because I owe so much to her and we've shared so much together. And I remember when we were developing the asking styles and asking matters, that we talked about all the other ways in which people need help figuring out how to ask, whether they're asking for raises, whether they're asking for what they need in a relationship or whatever it is. And the challenge with asking for yourself, and even though you're asking for an institution, you're putting yourself out there, right? It's about you and your relationship to it and how they see you. There are many ways in which it's different from sales. So we all fear rejection because we're in asking for anything for ourselves. And I think with charitable gifts, the level's raised because we're not even asking for ourselves then, right? We're asking for someone else. And if the rejection comes when we're just trying to do good work for someone else, that rejection can feel greater. I think there's another reason. One of the things I've been tackling a lot lately, I do a lot of work with boards, right? Because board volunteers are asking.
You've written a book on that subject, haven't you?
Yes. And the challenge there is that we put these board members in the awkward position of having to lean on friends and family. I just did a board training last night, actually, for a visual arts center. And I know they do a lot of this swapping of gifts in their community, right? Where you ask people to come to your gala, you go to theirs. You give them $1,000, they give you $1,000, and so it's not only the fear of rejection there, but it's the fear of stepping on the relationship. And then you add on top of that the fact that we get no training in our business. I looked up and look, we want the people who cut our hair to do a good job. We want to look good. But do you know how many hours of training you need in New Jersey to cut hair?
How many?
1,200.
How many hours of training do you need to be a fundraiser in New Jersey?
I've never had one. I've only been trained by learning, and I learned over time. But if I'd actually been trained, I could have done a better job from the beginning. And a lot of people now get more training, but virtually no one's getting that many hours, and our board members are getting nothing. And how many times does someone on the program side become the executive director, right? We expect a lot. And I don't know if we've got executive directors on today. If you want to type in that you are, we'd love to know what your positions are. If you could tell us, are you director of development, board member, executive director? What do you do in the nonprofit world? Type that in the chat box. But you've got all these executive directors of small organizations where it's their first executive directorship. They have no idea what they're doing. The board's expecting them to fundraise right away. And so in every level, then you've got people who might have started as a development associate, and then they become director of development or head of something, and they have to, and they're supposed to be able to go cultivate and ask for money. And it's really daunting. The direct mail, special events, crowdfunding, institutional funding. You've got a lot of people to help you with that. It's I don't want to say any of that's easy, because nothing in fundraising is easy, but the thing that is most daunting is cultivating and soliciting individuals for larger gifts. We get no training in, and we send our staff and our volunteers out to slaughter. So this is why it's difficult. These are all the reasons and all the things I'm trying to cover. And I see I thank everyone for typing in here, for Jim and for me. Mary, executive director, you probably are feeling much of what I'm saying about executive directors. We've got an associate athletic director for development, and Ashley, Ellen. Well, you can all see from each other. We don't have to read them all. Another executive director, CEOs. I was the executive director of a small dance company in Chicago in 1987. And I was the only staff person. I had never fundraised. There was no money for training, and I had to figure it out on my own. And my first week there, I had a renewal grant for the largest institutional gift to the dance company, and didn't know what to do and had to learn from doing. And that's daunting, especially when it's about the individual and cultivating and calling people and trying to get them to meet with you and get to know the institution better. So it's a challenging field.
Brian, here's an easy one. How do we help our nonprofit friends overcome such fear?
It feels like such a lead-in question to the asking styles and other things. There are a few pieces here, Jim. One is putting it in the right perspective.
Yeah.
So, the individual gift work, which really is, I believe, the hardest work, because that's where relationships and personalities so much come into play. We need to help people understand strategic relationship-based fundraising as opposed to this transactional fundraising we do a lot of, where we barely even know anyone and we ask them for money. And we keep asking them through direct mail, crowdfunding, whatever, and we gather whatever we can. There's a place for that and a need for some of that. But to the extent that we move away from that towards building relationships that lead to larger gifts, if we can do that and get people in that mindset of building relationships, I think we can break down some of those walls. And we want those relationships. Here's another question. Here's a question I ask all the time when I train. And I'll ask you, Jim, what is the longest number of consecutive years you have given a gift to any one nonprofit? And I'll say, for me, I graduated from college in 1984. I'm really loyal to my university. And so I will be giving for the 39th year this spring, right? It might have been $25 when I started, but every year, unless they forgot to ask me, I've given them something. How about for you?
That would also be my alma mater. I believe yours is Brandeis. Mine's George Washington University. And you're a youngster. And so I graduated several years before you. So I think my giving began in the late 70s.
Late 70s,
Pretty modest gifts, by the way. Pretty modest gifts.
Yes. So actually, if anyone wants to type in for you, what's the longest number of consecutive years you've given?
That's a wonderful question. Can I borrow that question?
You may. And the reason I ask this is that I love individual. I wish I never had to ask anyone for money. And Andrea knows as well as anyone, it still puts the fear in me and so forth. But individuals, especially America, has the most extraordinary history of charitable giving. We have set the bar for the world, right? We're the country that has voluntarily supported social services and education and the arts and so many things. And we're loyal. if someone pays some attention to us, we're going to keep giving year in and year out. So when you treat someone transactionally for that one gift and try to just get one gift from someone rather than building a relationship, you're really cutting your nose off to spite your face. Because if you treat people well, people will give year after year, often with very little except a thank you note, because they believe they have, because there's some relationship. Last night, someone said to me in this training, how do you deal with the fact that we might go into, we could be in a recession, and some people are going to say, well, I'm only going to give 3 of my 5 gifts. I said, that's why we build relationships, because I can guarantee you that person is not going to choose to stop giving a gift where he has a relationship. He's going to get rid of the gifts where he's not going to feel so bad because there's no relationship. Right. So I think of individuals as for their annuity of giving over time, which leads them to Andrea's work of capital campaigns, because very few people give their first gift to a capital campaign or their largest. But if you've been if people are engaged for a while, they're going to give you big gifts, and then planned gifts, those ultimate gifts. Right. So you're looking at this annuity that builds over time. And so that's number one. And that's a long-winded answer, but it's an important one because this work should be based on relationships. It should be based on relationships. Second is training. We need to teach people what to do, what to say, what a meeting is about, what it's not about, how to ask for a gift, how do you phrase it, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the biggest obstacle is fear of the unknown. And most of our board members and volunteers have not experienced a solicitation for themselves. It's the difference between giving and asking. That's another question I ask. I say, who in this room has ever had anyone say, gee, Jim, I'd love to meet with you and get to know you better and hopefully then come back and ask you for a gift in person? And many people say, no, never. There's so much asking in this world. We get these direct mails still all the time, especially end of year. Crowdfunding, if you're on social media a lot, you're getting them every single day, right? We phone calls still sometimes. But how often does someone actually take the time to reach out and say, gee, I want to get to know you better, see what you're interested in, learn about how your relationship here started, learn about your feelings on philanthropy and how you decide who to give to, what's important to you, in the hopes that there's a match and that we can come back to you. Very rarely. I say, I've been in this business forever, right? Only once has even one of my organizations come to me and asked me. I have made 2 endowed gifts in my lifetime. And neither of those organizations has even come back to talk to me about it or ask me to give more. We really fall short on this. We really fall short. We're constantly. They weren't clients.
No, they were not clients.
You didn't train them.
Yeah, exactly. But we spend so much time thinking, who else can we ask for money? Instead of spending the time to building the relationships we have. And I know some organizations don't have all those relationships. Some are young, there are reasons, but almost every organization that I've ever worked for actually had lots of untapped potential in front of them. So it's also reorienting them towards that. And I often talk now about money versus philanthropy, because when we're going out and asking, we're wearing our money hat. And money, as a matter of fact, I just spoke to someone who actually writes, he's called the Moneyist, and he writes for money markets. And he's constantly talking about this relationship with money that we have, because that can get in your way, right? We're coming to the table as fundraisers thinking, oh, money's scarce. Oh, we're not supposed to talk about money. Oh, this, oh, that. And our donor is coming with charitable intent. So think of what it's like for you to have charitable intent and how exciting it is to be a donor. How much better it makes life, and it's been proven through the book, The Paradox of Generosity, which studied generosity in general and in philanthropy in particular. And I don't want to be facetious and say, gee, if you give me your money, your life is going to be better. But we actually know that people who are more charitable feel better and have there are all sorts of indicators related
Live
to
longer, live
Yeah.
healthier.
Healthier, lower levels of depression, lower levels, lower blood pressure, and so forth. There are lots of correlations. So if we can go in with a sense of philanthropy rather than dunning people and doing transactional fundraising, it will pay off in the long run.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, let me ask you, besides the capacity of the prospect and the amount of cultivation time, is the process of raising $1,000 gift a lot different than the process of raising $1 million gift?
No, it depends. It's all dependent on not the size of the gift, but the capacity of the donor relative to the size of the gift. For some people, $1,000 is going to be a significant gift that takes a lot of thought, maybe discussion with a spouse or significant other, paying it out over time. And for others, $100,000 wouldn't need that type of thought. So, and I think of one of the last campaigns I was in, the lead gift took 2 meetings. One where we went and met the couple and asked for the gift, and they said, can you give us 2 weeks and we'll get together, come back. We came back and they said, we'll do it. That was $1 million. We had a $50,000 gift that took 7 meetings. So it really depends on the donor. Some donors want a lot of cultivation. Some donors have a lot of questions. Others are sold right away. I don't see much rhyme or reason in it. And this is one of the things I love about individual fundraising. You know, Andrea knows me extraordinarily well. She knows I don't like events. I don't like big crowds. I don't whatever. I love one-on-one. My whole life is about one-on-one. Being with one person together, having good conversation. And the beauty of the individual giving is that we get to know people individually, build those relationships, put the time where it's needed, ease off where it's not needed, right? We get to know what people need and we cater to them. And we ask them what they want and then we give it to them. And there's nothing wrong with asking what they want. One of the questions I say you should ask is, how do you make your philanthropic decisions? And people say, well, how can you ask them that, right? Well, if we were a foundation, there'd be, you'd have guidelines. If we were a corporation, they'd say, these are the types of organizations we fund. If you were a government funder, there'd be an RFP for proposals. We don't know with individuals unless they happen to have a foundation. And it's appropriate to ask, to say, is there a match? What's meaningful to you? So then we meet them where they are.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember your first ask? And tell us about it.
Well, my first ask happened to be a foundation ask. I referred to it at the beginning. So when I started as the executive director of Joseph Holmes in 1986 or 87, whatever it was, I had to apply to the Joyce Foundation for a renewal of a 2-year, $60,000 grant, $30,000 a year. Now our whole budget was $200,000, and this was $30,000 a year. And I had never even written a proposal. So that was an institutional one, and I had to figure out how to write a proposal. I didn't like the last one. I asked someone, I think I asked the assistant artistic director, is it okay if I write something different? Because this doesn't make sense to me. And she said, sure, you can write whatever you want. I went and met the funder. I have to tell you a funny story, even though we want to talk about individuals. Here I was in the arts, and I was sort of artsy fartsy myself. So I walked into this funder's office, and she came out. The receptionist called her. She came out into the lobby, and she said, "Wow, look at how they're dressing these days." And I was mortified. I was wearing funky socks and a turtleneck shirt. I was looking like I was a dance, but I was an administrator. And she didn't hold it against me in some way, but I realized, oh, I'm not dressing like the other people who are applying for funding, and I had to tone it down a little bit. That was institutional. Can I remember the first person I asked for any gift? I don't know. That's a really good one. I can remember so many gifts. If you asked me about a particular donor, I could remember exactly what I asked them for and what they gave.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the first one. We're going back now.
Hey, you're going to come back and you'll do some banging of the head, and we'll
Yeah,
talk about your first
I'll try
ask.
and think about that. It could have been a
Yeah,
board member
I
of
think
that
this one's a
organization.
little closer to home. Most people assume that you have to have a silver tongue
Yeah.
and be a super extrovert to be a good solicitor.
Yeah.
You are a self-admitted introvert.
Yes.
And you contend that there are advantages that introverts enjoy in fundraising. In fact, you're even writing book number 4 about it. So what type of advantages does an introvert enjoy in fundraising?
Yes. Yes. So, well, it does bring us to the asking styles. And I don't know if anyone on today, other than Andrea, my founding partner, knows about them. But the asking styles are this rubric we created based on this wonderful idea Andrea had, that there were different temperaments. I remember we were calling them that originally. And that it might be helpful to figure out what type of asker you are, right, to understand yourself better in the relationship. And from that, we came up with the asking styles based on how you think, analytic, intuitive, and how you interact, extrovert, introvert. And I'm not going to go into great detail on them, though anyone can go to quiz.askingmatters.com. There's a 30-question quiz. You can even do it while you're listening to us, and you'll get a response on the screen and by email if you're primary and secondary. But very simply, the rainmaker is the person everyone thinks of. The analytic extrovert, objective, goal-oriented, driven. Okay, you said no, I'm on to the next person. I'm not going to take it personally. Lots of great skills, and people think of those skills. What they forget are the skills that Andrea, as our go-getter, has. The big ideas people, the people with great energy, who are quick on their feet and really engaging and make friends easily, as Andrea does. Or our introverts. So we have our kindred spirits. I'm a classic kindred spirit, the intuitive introverts. And we're feelings oriented, we're sensitive. And because we tend to be sensitive, we look at people wanting to be caring and thoughtful towards them. And then we have our mission controllers, the analytic introverts, who are systematic, planful, and such. So here we have two, what you'd think are introverted, non-fundraising types who bring great skills. Everyone has something, no one has it all. And you play to your strengths. And then actually, one of the things we learned from these is how to partner, right? How to partner, how to complement the strengths you have. So forever in Chicago, I talked about these campaigns. I worked for a long time in Chicago. My buddy was a go-getter, and he was able to bring that extroversion. And how did we use that? Well, we'd go together and he'd open the meetings, right? If it was someone we didn't know, it was easier for him to open the door to that person. It was hard for me to open the door. The good news but as a go-getter, he could talk a blue streak. And those of us who have been in fundraising for a while know that listening is one of the most important skills. So when we talk about what an introvert brings to the table, one of the things introverts bring is that they listen more than talk in general, especially the mission controllers. The mission controllers are the most likely to sit back, listen, and watch as things are unfolding. And it's a critical skill for fundraising. Often when I teach this, the go-getters laugh and say, oh yeah, I talk too much. I know I talk too much. I have to shut up, right? But you need everyone. No one has it all. But what everyone has, and the reason why introverts, besides listening, can be powerful fundraisers, is that we all have a story. We all have our own story of why an organization is so important to us. And that's what sells. When we're reaching out and trying to build a relationship with someone, they want to hear our story. They want to hear what we have to say. They want to hear our passion, and they want to know that we are being authentic.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I told all these board members last night. You don't have to have an elevator pitch. You don't have to remember everything about the organization.
Yeah.
Why do you believe in this visual arts center? Yeah. Right? Why do you think this organization is important? And if you know how to say that, and you're really excited about your organization, then you're halfway there. And everyone has that. I see there was a question from Diana about
Yeah,
repeating
Diana
the
Hoyt
tool.
is one of our
Yeah.
colleagues from Phoenix.
Yes. Yes. And actually, what I'll do, just so it's easy, is I'm going to type in the link right here. It's called
And by the way, Brian, that's going to be
quiz.askingmatters.com.
on the final slide we show for your sign
Great.
off, folks.
Great. Everyone can go here. It's totally free. I encourage you to have your whole board and all your staff and your clients or anyone take it. It's so valuable, not only in terms of helping people understand who they are in this whole fundraising process, but I use it also. I use it to help people partner, to understand how to work together. We now look at it. We look at boards. When I work with a board, I map it out. Where is everyone? Last night, we noticed almost everyone was on the analytics side and a lot of people down towards mission controller. Well, what does that actually mean then for your organization? Can you see how that is reflected in how you make decisions? Because the best decisions do come from a range of input. We have the rainmaker who's looking at the goals, right? What's the goal? The go-getter says, what's the opportunity? Also in the future, but broader, unconstrained, maybe by quantitative. This is how Andrea has created so many extraordinary things in her career, right? By thinking outside of the box. What moves my heart? Let's not forget the people. And what's the plan?
Yeah.
All well and good to have goals and see an opportunity, but we need someone who's going to make it happen. So we use these. We encourage everyone to take them, not just for fundraising, but to understand their organization better. To see it just as you would through a Myers-Briggs or a DISC or anything like that. The beauty of the asking styles, besides their inherent simplicity, is that you can use them not only for fundraising, but for all the personality discussion that is so helpful to have in terms of dynamic. So Diana, thank you for asking for that again. So that's the asking styles, and really key to this whole idea of us understanding who we are and feeling confident that we have skills to apply to the work. And I want to say one more thing, Jim, before sending it back to you, and that is that people think because I've done this work successfully and raised a lot of money that there's some secret sauce I have, that I get into the room with a donor and that donor doesn't leave until I get what I've asked for. You know, that I somehow squeeze them, corner them, convince them because I just am such a fabulous storyteller or something. None of that is true. What's true is that I respect them. I ask them a lot of questions. I build the relationship and I think about them. I treat them well. And people give to people, you know, and to the extent you're yourself and you just like people and treat them well and cater to them and such, you can do this work. And it's so much less about that one moment where you say, you know, would you consider a gift of $50,000 for our capital campaign? If you've done all your other work, that moment is much less important.
Yeah. Hey, you enjoyed the gift of spending a lot of time with the late Gerald Tanis, who, if anyone had the secret sauce, I think he had it. He was the greatest selling author, presenter, thought provoker in our profession. Do you have a favorite Gerald Tanis story?
Well, I have a favorite quote of his. That I use all the time. He said, "No one ever listened themselves out of a gift." I love it.
Repeat that again.
No one ever listened themselves out of a gift. Meaning, if you're a fundraiser and you're listening, you're not being detrimental to getting a gift.
Yeah.
Right. That listening is it's so underrated today and so important. But to go into these meetings with donors and really get to know them, not do all the talking, not try to sell them on everything you're doing, but to learn about them. That's my number one quote from Jerry. I think about it all the time. And it should give us comfort, because I think one of the many challenges we have in this field is we go into these meetings thinking, gosh, we've got to be charming throughout. We have to just keep being witty and telling them this and telling them that, when in truth, we want them to talk.
Yeah.
We want them to do the talking.
75% of the time. And we talk 25% of the time.
Well, that would be quite an ideal. Our goal is always at least 50. And I think 60 is really great. I think it's hard to get the donor to talk to 75% of the time. That might happen sometimes. But if we're doing more than 50%, we're really in a danger zone, because we're talking so much. And Andrea taught me some of this. As I say these words, some of these are things that Andrea first brought to me when we started this. And that was that if you do all the talking, you create a wall of words where people can't even remember. People remember the least of what they hear. They remember more of what they themselves say or actually do, right? If they have something experiential, and they remember the most about how they felt. And they're going to feel better if you're asking them questions and they're talking about themselves. Most people are feel honored and that they're more the center of attention and that you're trying to learn from them. So you want them to do the talking as opposed to you, and that should give us comfort. If we ask good questions, and then we ask good follow-up questions, then others are doing the talk. Then our donors are doing the talking and feel really engaged.
Yeah. We hear a lot about the importance of prospect research.
Yeah.
But what do you think is absolutely essential for us to know about the donor prospect before we ask for the gift?
Okay. So I'm not a big research guy. It's helpful to have some idea of what someone's capacity is. But here's how I learned the capacity. It's by asking them year after year and developing the relationship.
Yeah.
What scares us the most is that first gift. This is something over the years of teaching I've really focused in on. So often when we do this work, we're starting this work, and it means we're going to some of these people for the first time, and that seems daunting because we're supposed to go and say, would you consider a gift of $10,000? It seems daunting. What do we know? It's a negotiation point.
Yeah.
We will never know until we ask. Why? Because we don't know someone's full circumstance until we ask. And I'm going to bring up an example of someone that Andrea knows well from the work we did together at Hudson Guild, Emily Meshner. So this woman had retired in her 40s. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in New York. I promise you she didn't have a piece of clothing that cost $100. She had no artwork, nothing fancy. Wealth Engine at the time said she could give 10 to something $1,000.
Yeah.
She gave $1 million.
I love it.
Right? And there was no way to know that from the research. So I say, do your research, but use it with a grain of salt, because research can only do so much more today. There's so much information out there, but we don't know people's circumstances. I had a situation, okay, I thought there was someone, the mother of a board member. She had an apartment in New York, a place in New Jersey, a townhouse, and a place in Florida. I thought, wow, 3 homes. I met with her to get to know her. It turned out the apartment in New York was rent controlled. The place in New Jersey, her boyfriend owned. They weren't married, and they split the condo in Florida. So actually, I was talking to someone who had half of one home, really, not 3. Yeah. I couldn't have known that. I thought, wow, this woman must have $1.5 million worth of property or something like that, and it turned out no. So I find I learn by asking. Not only the first time I ask, but by asking all these questions to find out maybe where they vacation, where the kids go to school, where the other places they give, where they're involved, what they think about philanthropy. And over
Yeah.
time, I learned to where their sweet spot is in asking. It's not that first year, right?
Hmm.
That first year is a bit of a stab in the dark, no matter what.
Yeah.
But if I ask for 5 and it seemed really easy, next year I can ask for 10 or more.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going back and asking for the annual fund every year, not trying to ratchet people up
Yeah.
every year, but I find where they plateau and then where we can go to the next level by building relationships. So
Here's a question we hear a lot. How do we know the time is right to ask for the gift?
So here's something I came up with. Well, it's what I do, and I put it into words. It's very simple. I ask permission to ask.
Huh? Huh?
I don't ask, can we get together to talk about a gift? I basically make it conditional. Would you consider it? Do you think, is the time right? If I'm really unsure, I will say, I don't know if the time is right. I know you really like us, and of course we're looking to raise money to do X, Y, and Z. Is the time right? Do you feel the time's right for us to come and talk to you? By asking, rather than by asking to ask, rather than trying to
Yeah.
propose a date, we let the donor come to us. We let the donor come forward, and I find I get further asking. Like, more people are willing to say, yes, I'd consider meeting with you. Yes, I would meet with you, because we're leaving the decision more in their hands by doing that. It's this little
Huh?
tweak.
Hey, the
And
thing I got to ask you, I
yeah,
love that approach. Does that type of question uh, fit particularly with any of the 4 asking styles?
well, you might say that maybe because I'm a kindred spirit, I walk more gingerly in this area, and so I'm more comfortable asking permission to ask. It's very respectful. I don't know. It could be a mission controller who's very systematic and sees the value of this one little extra step. I haven't thought it out more than that, but I think in general, when we get into the meeting, we ask people if they would consider a gift. Would you
Right.
consider? Right? We give them the opportunity to just say they'd even consider it. And I think just even asking them to consider meeting with us, or are they ready, helps them get more
Mhm.
ready. Right.
Yeah.
By the way, we
I
had
got
a
another
question
easy question.
before.
Hey, I have another easy
Okay.
question for you. How do we
Right.
know how much? How do we know how much to ask for?
Well, how do we know? It's related to the last question. We sort of don't know. Um, we don't, unless we've asked before. We're never 100% sure. Um, uh, but we try and gather information about capacity, interest, willingness, and make a judgment on that. Now, I've had some cases where I've asked for something that turned out to be way out of the reach, which I couldn't have known until I asked. I remember one gift for a few campaigns ago, but what happened was we didn't know that the husband was retiring. The
Yeah.
husband was a professor in the medical school of a university, earning a significant amount, and was about to retire. And their situation was going to change. Sometimes people have said, "Wow, I wish I were that. I could do that for you." Once in a while, someone thinks, "How dare you ask for that much?" And honestly, the only people who've ever done it, I'm going to be very blunt here,
Yeah.
who have sort of tried to put it on me and make me feel bad, are people who could give that amount and felt they were put on the spot,
Mhm.
and weren't as charitable as they could have been given their capacity. And I had to come to terms with that and say, I don't like when someone responds like that. I feel bad. I worry about whether I've broken the relationship. But if I'm constantly in fear of that, I'll never ask for enough. I'll always ask for too little.
Yeah.
So I've learned to put that in perspective and go for something significant and say, look, we need to ask for a significant gift. We're trying to do significant work, and we don't know who can give them until we ask for them.
Right. Here's another mechanical type of question. How many representatives of the nonprofit should go on and ask?
I have had as many as 6.
Sounds like a lot, Brian.
Well, it was for a naming opportunity at the university, and the president was there, the senior vice president for development, me as the contact, the two volunteers who had brought the couple to the table, and the head of the arts program. Everyone had a role. It was significant enough to bring everyone together to discuss this and ask them. Almost every meeting can have two. Perhaps not if there's something very confidential to discuss. I have one donor in Chicago who would only meet with me. She said, I hate doing this, but I will meet with you. You can't even bring Ron. You have to come by yourself. So I'd come by myself. But two is almost always acceptable and very helpful in terms of partnering and such. Jim, I think we've got two questions in here.
Okay, let's take them. The show belongs to the learning community. What do we have?
So the first
John, do you want to share the questions?
Yeah, or I can see them here. I opened the chat.
Okay.
So we've got one from Margie.
If you're tough, you take them.
Okay. After you speak and learn about them, can you say something like this? We need $5,000 for our next show and would be honored to have you help us. So here's what I'd say about that, Margie. First of all, I don't like to use the word need. What I like to do is talk about our vision for what we can accomplish and the impact we can have, vision and impact. So when I ask, it's usually in the context of that, and sometimes that's the hardest piece, to have a story like that. And I ask for an exact amount. So if I'm, you say, we'd love you to have us help us, it doesn't give the donor a sense of what would be a helpful gift from them. They don't know, are you asking a bunch of people? Do you need 5 people to cover this? Is it 100 people?
Yeah.
It makes it seem like you're just going around fishing in a way, that you're asking everyone for something and you're seeing what you can get. So Jim, to your point of, how do you know what to ask for? If I'm going up to someone to ask, I should have some sense of whether this is someone who could cover the whole thing, half of it, $1,000, $500, and to approach them and ask them for that specific gift as helping us make our goal of $5,000 so that we can have this particular impact, right? By putting up our next show, because this is our vision. This is what we feel this show will do. And it would be so helpful if you could contribute $1,000 of the $5,000 that will make this show happen.
Right.
So a little bit different. Do you want to add anything to that?
I want to get to this next mechanical question. And by the way, on how many representatives, I like the 2-on-1 formula. If I'm meeting with one prospect, I want no more, maybe the CEO and the board representative who knows the prospect. If we're meeting with a husband and wife, maybe that opens the door to have, I wouldn't go to 6, but maybe 3 nonprofit representatives. But I never want twice as many people from the nonprofit. I don't want to overwhelm the prospect.
Yeah, it really depends. That 6 was unusual, but appropriate.
How did it turn out? Did you get the gift?
$3.5 million. Yes,
I guess maybe we should try 6 pack.
It was appropriate in that one case. That was the only case I had 6. But you asked, how many can go, and people don't realize, as long as there's a role for everyone, you don't want to bring an extraneous person. You want to bring someone who's playing a particular role, either because of their relationship, because of the information they have, because of their imprimatur, because they're the chair and it says something. You don't want someone just hanging around there taking notes, right?
Hey, let's get inside a solicitation about how soon do you want the ask made? Say your meeting is somewhere between 40 to 60 minutes, and that's probably on the high side of a major gift prospect. When do you recommend the ask be placed on the table?
Yes. So this is another that harkens back to Andrea and her brilliance, because another thing she helped create, we created the Asking Styles together based on her thought, but there was another piece that she brought to Asking Matters called the Arc of the Ask, which has become a seminal piece of our work at Asking Matters. And the idea is that the ask should be somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
You don't ask at the beginning because you haven't had a chance to warm up. You haven't had a chance to ask questions that could actually impact how the donor thinks about the gift or the amount you actually ask for
Mm.
relative to the amount you thought you'd ask for. You don't want to ask at the end because often there's a lot to discuss.
Right.
Once the gift
Right.
is on the table and you get the response back, you're learning a lot of information you can't learn before. I said earlier that just from the research, we don't always know what a donor is capable of. Right? We don't know what their other circumstances are. Once we ask for an amount, we learn all of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could do that, but I just became the chair of another board. I wish I could do that, but I just made a capital gift to another organization. Let me think about that, but I'd have to talk to my family because of X, Y, and Z. This year is tough. Could I do it next year? I'm about to switch jobs and that will help. Right? We learn a lot. So if we don't ask till we're close to the end, we risk not having time to really talk about.
That's always my biggest
the
worry.
important thing. Yeah, so it's somewhere in the middle. You can't be rigid because you may be having an amazing conversation and learning a lot. You may want to put it off a bit. You might have a donor who just is giving you one-word answers and there isn't a lot of rhythm in the conversation. And so you're moving on to the ask earlier. But it's never at the beginning. 30, we're going back almost 30 years when I worked for Brandeis. I remember a fundraiser saying to me, when I take someone out to lunch, I said, okay, let's just talk about the gift now and then have lunch. And at the time, I didn't understand this because I was learning fundraising as well. And I came to learn that was really bad. That it's not a matter of
controller?
It would be interesting. I can remember the person somewhat, and it would be interesting. That person's hasn't been in my life for 25 years. It would be interesting to know now. No, I don't know, but it's not just a matter of getting together and someone tells you what they're going to do and then you have a nice time. It's much as we would say. I think these are Andrea's words too. It's an intentional conversation.
And by the way, I don't know how you all feel. I hate asking in a public place, particularly during lunch. I think there are too many things you can't control. I rather ask in their office or your office or home.
Well, one of the things I teach in setting up the meeting is that every one of those has pluses and minuses. The number one thing is to do it where the donor is going to be comfortable. And often that means also where it's going to be convenient. We can't always get the donor out from behind their desk or away from the house or whatever. But, and Margie says, I always seem to be in a lunch place. I'm fine with meals because people are, there's a certain contentment when you're eating and a certain slight informality, which I think actually is helpful. I've heard people say they think it's too informal to do it over lunch. It could be because I did a lot of my fundraising early on with Brandeis, my alma mater, where I worked many years as the head of fundraising for the Midwest. And I was always going to meals because it was just part of the culture in a way. And you have to watch out. I don't let donors choose the restaurant if I can help it because it could be noisy or the tables could be too close together, right? As Margie says, breaking bread to join together. I've had a lot of success doing it over food, but you really have to stake it out. I get there early if it's a public place because I need to pick the table. I need to make sure. It's funny that Andrea is saying not good for the waistline. I remember bringing the president of Brandeis out, and we went from one meeting to another. So we had just gone to this really big lunch with one donor, and we were going, and I can say who it is. We were going to the home of Mrs. Cohn. She has long passed now, Rosalind Cohn, and the president, Yehuda Reinhardt, knew that she was going to put out food, and he said to me, "I'm sorry, I'm pulling rank, but I cannot eat again, and you're going to have to eat for the both of us, so it looks like we're eating whatever she puts out." and I dutifully, because he was my boss, I ate all this food, even though we just had this huge lunch across the street. I remember clearly at the Drake Hotel with another donor, and I had to eat a second time. So
that's called taking one for the team.
absolutely take it with you.
We're coming to the end. This has been a very rich conversation. I want to get a few last questions and then check on the audience.
Yeah.
Do you think it takes different skills to ask in person than via video conferencing?
Boy, I'm wanting to do some research now into video conferencing, which started in earnest with COVID. And I think it's going to be a real boon to us over time. Let me first say that people say, where do you think video asking is going to be? I think at the end of the day, I think we may end up with less asking in person because people are busier and they'll feel comfortable defaulting to video, but we'll have more face-to-face. What's most important is face-to-face, because if we're just on the phone, phone's always been difficult for me, except with people I know really well. It's hard to gauge what's happening. We learn so much from people's from their facial expressions, right? So I think we're going to gain in the end by having all this video conferencing, though we may be meeting less often. We'll also, for those of us who are regional and national and have all sorts of logistical, geographic issues, I think video conferencing is a boon. Is it different? It's a little different. I still feel a certain something, though it could be my age, right? It could be a generational thing, being in person. Your question is a little different. It's whether anyone there are certain skill sets that would lend themselves to one or another. I could say that there's something about the screen giving a little distance and maybe a little safety rather than sharing space. You could say that those who are more introverted, or maybe those who are shy, two different things, by the way, it's something I'm covering in this book, might do better with that little space, the comfort of in their own space and not in someone else's. I don't know if there's research on that yet, but it's a very interesting question, Jim.
Lenny, before we check if there's a final question from the audience, how do you suggest that a proposal or marketing material be used during a major gift solicitation?
Okay, I'm actually going to go back to Jerry Panis, who never took material in. Jerry Panis never took material into a meeting. He said, I just want to have a conversation. I want to look into people's eyes. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to be distracted by it. Now, I don't agree 100%. I think there are times where you can bring something in. Actually, one thing I've always brought in is, I don't know if I have one right here. I have been the biggest purveyor of small steno pads for 35 years. I think it's okay to bring a pad in and make some notes. That's a slightly different question. In terms of presentation material, I would sooner, some people ask for it in advance, especially our mission controller donors who want to be prepared. So you have to think of who your donor is. I like sending it after for two reasons. One, I learn in the meeting what's important to the donor rather than assuming and coming in with a deck. Right? So that it's customized for the donor. Actually, I'm going to give you a third reason. Second is that I like having the extra touch afterwards. It's all about touches. How many times can we touch someone and involve them? So if I leave a meeting and I have to send them material, I can first thank them for the meeting that day. The next day or a few days later, I can get back to them with the material they asked for.
Right.
I can then get back to them a few days after that and ask them what they thought about it. And then I can get back to them at the end of the 2 weeks if I was asking them for a gift or whatever. It gives me not one, but actually sometimes two extra touches. The third reason I don't like to bring it in is sometimes it can feel to the donor like you figured it all out in advance. So I don't like bringing it in. What I might bring in today, though, is I might play a really short video on my iPad. With a testimonial from a participant, or showing a program in action, or a live feed to my program, which you can do now. And so I just want you to see what's happening in the classroom today, or what's happening on our athletic field, or in our lab, if Something
Hey,
like that.
John Margent, pardon me. I know we're coming here to the end.
Yes,
Can you put up Brian's contact slide? And Brian,
yes.
is there a last question? I don't see one there. First of all, this is how you
No.
can reach Brian.
Yeah,
And
these are all the
Brian,
ways.
I want to thank you not for just a very productive and rich hour with our learning community of volunteer and professional nonprofit leaders, but the leadership that you, and I also want to take this moment to recognize Andrea, have
Yes.
provided to the profession and the
Thank you.
sector. And you've been always so willing to share your time and your wisdom. So thank you for the leadership role you have played. Thank you for, I think this is I don't know if the second or third time you did on the series, but I'm giving you fair warning. I'm going to invite you back.
Okay.
And I think you have to get on the subway at 5 o'clock. And so I want to thank everybody in our learning community. Thank you for the services that you provide, our volunteer and professional nonprofit leaders. Every day, you're touching, improving, and saving more lives. And we are so grateful. You are our heroes. And thank you, Ryan.
Absolutely.
How do we do on time? And
Perfect.
we'll see our audience 2 weeks from now. And we'll have the best-selling author, Alan Paul, talking about Write Like You Speak. And so good night to everyone. And
Good
we'll
night.
see you in
Thank
2
you
weeks.
all.
Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
Great. Thank you. And what we're doing,
Thank you,
by the
Jim.
way, we're putting on LinkedIn and Facebook a short 1,300 character space summary of Brian's key points. And then John does a special spin dry of the tape. And we will post that on Facebook and LinkedIn sometime between 10 and 11 a.m. tomorrow. So, wonderful. Brian, once again, thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
I will. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you to the audience. Thanks, John.